What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to my vlog. And so last time, I guess I kind of talked about one of the big problems with the internet with how easy it is to access some really explicit and mature stuff. Um, this time, I guess I'll be talking about another significant problem the issue that the internet has, maybe even a bigger issue than the previous one that I talked about. And I think a lot of it comes down to communication. The problem with a lot of areas of the internet is the only way to communicate is just through text of some sort. You know, whether it's blogs or Facebook posts, Twitter. I mean, there's all sorts of video things involved, which, those work too in terms of getting past that purely text-based barrier. But I guess, there are a lot of things that I see on Facebook that are, maybe interesting, funny little quips about something, or even just something that's designed to get you thinking, hey, this person's right. Maybe I hadn't really thought about that before, but like it, it's really hard to fully understand someone's intent sometimes. That can also be part of the reason why so many people on the internet will get into arguments with each other so easily, because somebody will leave a comment on something and they may or may not mean what the reader takes it to mean, but the reader reads it a certain way and, finds it offensive or finds it lacking in some way. And then they'll, get kind of annoyed with that and respond back. And I mean, some of it is pretty obvious, even in text. Name calling is pretty easy to spot out, or, even particular ways of wording things. Generally, the insults in particular are pretty easy to spot. But sometimes people will, type something in text as a comment or a post or whatever in a certain way, and, they don't necessarily mean anything, anything bad, anything hurtful by it, but it can be misinterpreted that way. And that's the problem with purely text-based communication, whether it's the internet or just phone texting or any of that kind of stuff, is that you don't really get the person's emotions and mannerisms and inflection behind it. There's so much more to communication than just words. I mean, there's body language, there is, like I said, vocal inflection, there's all sorts of other things that go into, really proper and complete communication so that it's not as confusing to somebody else. Now, I will grant that even in a normal person-to-person conversation, I'm not always the best at getting my thoughts across, or, saying things the right way, or communicating with the, intent that I mean. There's still some room for misinterpretation there, but it's a lot easier to misinterpret somebody on the internet just because of it being purely text-based. And even just beyond that, a lot of internet communication is so kind of one way, with blogs, I mean, really, even if there is, a kind of text communication discussion going in various, comment sections or replies to something, it's still, it's a lot easier to, miss things. And even just the recent trends in making things shorter, in just almost encouraging brevity within people's communications with each other, it's like that leaves even more room to, have something misinterpreted or not include the full story, which is part of the reason why everything on the internet seems to be up to interpretation these days, is because there's hardly ever room for the full story in any given situation, especially when it's fed to us via Twitter or even Facebook or really anything like that. I just really hope that this way of communication doesn't necessarily limit kids that are growing up with this in their own personal communication styles. I say that, I hope that, but there's already evidence that it's taking a turn for the worse IRL, because kids are having a harder time communicating with each other for more than just a couple of seconds. Not necessarily the really young kids that aren't even doing much with electronics. The ones that are too young to understand any of that. But once that is there, it's just so much easier to have that as a fallback and get so used to just having these brief, sometimes not even discussions, just being like, hey, here's this, and then that being it. The real conversations don't really happen online very much. I think that's one of the other kind of major shortcomings of, the internet as a whole, but especially text-based communication, is really getting that, real connection to somebody else. That's also a big part of the reason that it's so easy for some people to say something that is offensive, whether they mean it or not, is because it's kind of partially anonymous in some ways. You can have your internet self be totally different from your actual personal self. I try not to have that happen as much as possible with me and my videos and my connection really in general online. I try to be as much the actual me as possible and not just superlative internet me. But there's just a whole lot of this stuff that feeds into people being more focused on themselves. It's just, there are all these things about giving just quick little updates about you and, hey, yay me, I'm doing this. Or, oh man, this happened and I feel bad. Everybody feel sorry for me. I worry very much about the route and just the general path that all of this internet communication and making that a habit early on in life is feeding into our culture. Again, I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say this is true of, everybody out there, because it's not. There are some people who learn to have control with this kind of stuff. And, maybe it can sort itself out eventually anyway, but it's just, there are so many ways that communication can go wrong through the internet or through text that it's so much more difficult for that to go wrong when you're in person, because you can see the other person's feelings and how you can hear how they're communicating it, what emphasis they're putting on certain words and that kind of stuff. And even, one of the other concerns in terms of the mean comments and that kind of stuff that some people make is that, like, they don't have the person sitting directly in front of them to see their reaction, because conversations really are a two-way street that involves so much more than just words. Without having the person in front of you that you're talking about, it's so much easier to just say something that is hurtful to them and not even really realize it, because they're not in front of you and you can't see their reaction. If they're in front of you, you say something mean or that they don't like, you see their face scrunch up or see maybe tears start to develop in their eyes and that kind of thing. I am still, in general, a fan of technology, and I'm certainly not saying, let's throw out the internet, because there's a lot of good things that the internet brings about as well. But I think, really, like with a lot of my topics and things that I've been discussing, there's a lot of discretion that needs to be involved with communication online to people that you aren't directly in front of on a personal level. So anyway, yeah, I guess that about wraps up my thoughts on that. part of the reason I wanted to do this in general is just seeing a comment somebody made on a video that I wasn't even entirely sure how to interpret the mood of it. I mean, there were certain hints I could take and maybe conclusions I could come to based on certain words that were used, but even then I can't be entirely clear. So that was the whole reason I wanted to do this video topic thing. Feel free to leave your comments on all that below. Hopefully I won't misinterpret them, or anybody else who reads them, same thing. Yeah, so anyway, hope you're all doing well. Remember to just put some thought into your communication, and hopefully things will go smoothly. So yeah, like I said, hope you're all doing well, and I will see you next time. Later.